There we go. Okay. All right. So again, this is the intro to SkyGlass live training session. Topics we'll cover today are, we'll go over the onboarding basics, how to create a username, how to log in, the issues that people may have and how to tell if you cannot connect to the SkyGlass server. We'll also talk about deeply into the user interface basics. That'll be probably the biggest segment today. I'll go over all the UI buttons and all the sort of the cursory overview of all the different UI elements. We will talk about how to load traffic in both mill mode and standard mode. We will talk about how to change your home location. I missed that in the first class, so if I forget that again, somebody please please unmute and say, hey, I forgot that part, and I'll come back and cover it. We will talk briefly about traces, how to enable them, show them, adjust them, etc. We will open up the type list panel and cover that in sort of overview mode. We will talk in just a general sense about the watch list. We did cover that in a prior deep dive session that went about, an hour and a half or so, which is available online on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in the watch list deep dive, check that out. And then we will talk about how to restore your default settings from the preference panel. We will not talk about any of the advanced functions. Time travel mode will not be covered. We are doing that in a deep dive coming up, I believe, next Friday is, a week from Friday is the deep dive on the database. And then I believe in mid-June, we've got the time travel mode deep dive. We will not be talking about flight history reporting. We won't talk about the database. Like I said, that's coming up in the next deep dive. And we will not cover the preference panel. Okay, so before I get started, also, if you don't have your video on, which is fine, just be able use the gestures to give me a thumbs up when I ask questions, just so I can get kind of some sort of a verbal or, some sort of visual cue. Folks that have the video, you can obviously just raise your hand. So first thing, I just want to make sure, can everybody see my mouse as it moves around, or do I need to make that a little bit bigger? Thomas says yes. All right. Richard says yes. Or Mike Jones says yes. Okay. Richard, how about Ruth, can you see the my mouse as it moves around, or should I make it a little bit larger? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And Richard, you're welcome to chime in as well. All right, let me make it a little bit larger and we'll see how that goes.
Yes, I could see it.
You can? Oh, good.
Yeah, I have to find my mute.
Got it. All right. Oops. I think it's in the accessibility, right? Accessibility, right? Yeah. Here we go. Well, I should have had this pulled up already. Come on, there it is. And zoom. All right, well, I'll leave it there. Okay. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit of cross chatter. So Richard, I'm going to mute you because you become unmuted unless you wanted to say something. I'm just hearing myself come back on the speaker. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Okay, great. All right, without further ado, I'm going to close the agenda and we will get started. All right, so I'm going to take this a little bit in backwards format, just in case you're a user that's been plinking around with SkyGlass and your settings have gotten a little disjointed, or you've kind of brought yourself into a state that you don't really know. First thing I'm going to do is show you how to reset yourself back into the default mode. Okay, so I'm also going to quickly make my user interface a little bit larger. Close the watch list, clean things up a little bit. All right. And in the main button stack, which is on the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see this kind of groovy gear with this airplane on it. That is your preference panel. If you click on the preference panel, and then I want you to focus on the saved preference options, which are on the middle right, left-hand side. And then there's a couple of buttons here, full reset. This is going to basically crash the saved defaults and restore SkyGlass to its initial state, just like you downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. If you're logged in, it's going to log you out, just so you know. You're going to get a little warning panel there. So I'm going to hit proceed. While I have this up, you'll see we got a version check and trying to connect on the login screen. If your SkyGlass opens and those don't eventually change, like we get the version check turned to SkyRider 1.6 and the try and connect will go away, but then we'll give you some feedback. So let me go ahead and sign in. I'm going to turn on auto login, just so that'll blow by this login screen the next time I launch SkyGlass. But as you'll see, when I hit the login screen, then this bottom panel, which says trying to connect, will give you some feedback, basically telling you how long your license is going to last, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so to cover let me bring the login panel back up. I'm going to log out again. To cover how you get started from scratch within SkyGlass. So you've downloaded and installed the app. If you're on an installer, I'm sorry, if you're on Windows, then you're going to have an installer file that will do a few things. If you're on Mac, that you just get the app in a compressed format. All you have to do is decompress it, move it over to your applications folder. Pardon me. And if you have not created a username, that's your first step. You can pick any username that you want, enter it there, choose any password that you want. Make sure that you have used the same email that you had used on the avrlabs.com website account. And when you bought your subscription at checkout, make sure that those emails match. Otherwise, your account will not synchronize, when it updates and refreshes. And then you click on create. That will send off an email with an activation link. Go out and find that email, click the link, and then you can return to SkyGlass and log in. It's pretty basic. Something that will be coming in a future version, a lot of people have asked for it, is what's my password? I forgot what's my username? That functionality I'm working on now, so it's coming. So you'll be able to do that. But if you don't remember, just jump on the website, hit the need help button and ask me, and I can look it up for you real quick and give it back to you. All right. So before I go any further, first thing that you're probably going to want to do is scale your user interface if you're a beginner. On the bottom right-hand corner at the top of the main button stack, there are these double chevrons up and down. Click on that and drag up, and that scales all the elements of the user interface all the way around the screen. So this is a little bit larger for me personally, but it should be really easy for everyone to see. Is that easy to see for everybody? The size of the user interface, okay? Awesome. Okay, and we got a new one, a new person coming in. Troy, welcome. All right, looks like his audio is coming in. All right. Okay, so to continue, as I said, we've reset ourselves into the default settings, and there's a couple things that are enabled by default. First, we're dropped into mil mode, military only mode, and it's in auto refresh. So as we look at the main button stack here on the bottom right, you can tell that we're in military mode by a few different visual tells. First, we've got an icon of a fighter jet over the main big snapshot button, which is right here. And then this shield is the first indicator. This is the toggle of standard and military mode. And if that's green, that means it's enabled. And so you know you're in military mode. Also, just as for instance, behind the fighter aircraft in the center of this collection of icons here, we've got a yellow background. That also indicates that you're in mil mode. That will change when you're in standard mode, or if you're in private feeder mode, that also has a distinct color for it. All right, so let me keep working my way down the main button stack. As just a general, from the bottom right-hand corner, the main stack is this first row of buttons moving from far right over to the left. The next grouping is the auxiliary button stack. And then moving left from there, we have a number of pop-up panels that will sort of build on top of each other, depending on what settings that you have enabled. And as you toggle them on and off, those things will come and go. As an example, I'm going to click on the little map, folded map here in the auxiliary button stack, and you'll see now we've got a bunch of map options that pop up, and all the rest of them sort of slide up to the top. All right, so I'm going to disable the map options for right now, and we'll keep going. Okay, so working from the top down, again, we've got this main button. This main button is it's a load button for traffic, whatever mode that you're in, but it's important to note that it just takes a snapshot. So it's sort of a single load at the time that you click the button, as opposed to if you click on this next button here, the auto refresh toggle, that will keep the SkyGlass, every few seconds or so, depending on what you've got enabled. Let me turn that off, turn it back on again. That will keep, a current view of the aircraft traffic and keep it updated. All right. As we move our way down, this is the trace options panel, or the toggle. We'll talk about that a little bit later. This next one is taking a screenshot. Clicking on that, if you have not saved a screenshot location on your computer or on your device, if you're on mobile, that automatically just drops it into the photos album or photos location. But if you're on Windows or Mac, you'll be asked to choose a location on your hard drive, and then it remembers that location, and you can change that in preferences. We've already talked briefly about the preference panel. This is activated from this gear icon. And the last button that is enabled by default is this pop-up help. And you'll notice as I hover over any of these buttons, we've got this area right here above the main button stack and the auxiliary button stack, which gives you some quick help. And it basically is just a really brief description on whatever you're hovering around. So it's a nice way to get to know SkyGlass by just kind of moving yourself around, or moving your pointer around and getting a feel for all the different buttons, etc. If you haven't watched one of these fabulous live trainings yet. Okay, and the final button on the very bottom is a show hide the auxiliary button stacks and all the extra stuff that you have enabled. So let me briefly pop up the type list panel as an example. And if I hit this bottom button on the main button stack, it does a couple things. It's going to hide any of the list panels that are open, and also remove all the auxiliary button stack and all those extra preferences. So I like to do this when I'm, going to take a screenshot, share it on mobile, something like that. I kind of, minimize the interface. Depending on this, your settings, and depending on your, purpose, what you're trying to do in SkyGlass, that may be helpful for you. Okay. So let's talk briefly about camera controls before we get into any of the further detail. I'm going to go ahead and hide all the other UI elements so you can see the screen easily, my pointer. So on most computers, people are going to have at least a 2 or 3 button mouse. So left clicking and dragging anywhere on the map will translate the map around. Okay, it just moves it basically with the mouse, direction. If you right click and rotate or move your mouse, then you'll see that you're rotating the camera around sort of a fixed position. Okay. If you hold down the Option key on your keyboard and then left click, drag up and down, you'll notice that the elevation changes of the camera. All right. So let me I'm going to move my camera. I'm going to settle it all the way back down to the map by holding that Option key down and dragging downward. And I'm going to. Then you can also, the last piece of the keyboard control or the mouse controls is the scroll button. Your scroll wheel, or if you've got a little touch like on Macs, scrolling in and out will basically move the camera in and out of your camera center location. And so let me talk about that a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move and translate my mouse, and I'm going to zoom in and we'll see we've got this little purple target, okay, which basically stays center of the screen at all times, but it's going to get smaller and larger depending on how far zoomed in you are. This purple target represents the center of rotation for your camera, okay? It's kind of like the home base for the camera itself. As you translate, it moves over the surface of the map, but this is only related to the camera's center of rotation. Okay, so you can see if I move close in, you can see that rotation is nice and tight around that location. If I zoom out, then I can sort of zoom, rotate all the way around the United States, since we're sort of centered up on CONUS. Does that make sense to everyone so far? Okay, we got a thumbs up, looking good. Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so let me talk a little bit more about the targets, since we've covered the camera target. You'll notice, actually here, I'm going to expose the user interface again, and I'm going to click on this large flame icon in the auxiliary button stack, and that's going to do a couple things. We're going to clear all the traffic, and it's going to disable any auto refresh mode that may be on. Okay, so I've just cleared the screen so we're not cluttered up with traffic. All right, and you'll see that there are a couple other targets on screen here. We've got this blue one and a yellow one. And then there's this little teardrop on top of this in green or blue, and then if you hover over it, it's in green. So if I double click on the map location on the surface of the map, that blue target and blue teardrop will move. And so I'm going to just drag a little bit to the right so we can see all the different targets that are here, and so I can explain them easily. The far right target in orange, sort of this yellow-orange, that represents the current home location. So if I zoom out, you can see that home location is set up as the default home location is CONUS, continental United States. So it's basically the center point of the United States. It's a little abstract. It's a little north of Tulsa on the Kansas southern border. Okay, but again, this yellow target represents the home location that you have chosen or that's on by default. The purple target I've already talked about, that's the center of rotation for the camera. And then this blue, little bit different style of a target, this is the jumper. And the jumper has a couple of different functions. If you double click anywhere on the map, the jumper will zoom to that location, the camera will zoom over to that location, and then it does a little reverse geocode lookup of that place that you double clicked on, and it shows the latitude and longitude. So as I double click around, you'll see the map kind of moves and the camera moves to that jumper location, and then the reverse geocode also updates. You'll also notice at the top of your user interface, and we'll cover this a little bit more in detail in a second, on the top left, this also updates the jumper location readout is mimicked here in this top left. If you click on the teardrop, as you notice, if I move my mouse over to the teardrop, it turns green. If I click on that, then another thing happens. You'll see that orange target actually moves over, and now we have all three of the targets co-located on the screen. And so what we've done is we've moved our home location to wherever that jumper was. All right, so let's say if I wanted to quickly jump over to the East Coast, I'm going to zoom out, double click on the map, and then hover till I get that green indicator on the teardrop. Click there, and now you'll see that all three of my icons now are co-located. So my camera, my home location, and the jumper now are somewhere in mid-California area. All right, so let me just do that again. I'm going to move, drag, translate my map over a little bit. I'm going to click somewhere in South Florida. The jumper now moves there. My camera now moves there. And then if I click on the target, the teardrop as it turns green, then you'll see all three of those locations converge, and now I'm homed in, as you can see on the left-hand top, Broward County, Florida. Okay. I like the jumper because it's a nice, easy way to sort of move the camera around, double clicking, and it does a little zoom there. But keep in mind, if you double click, that just moves the camera. It hasn't actually moved to your home location. All right, that'll become more important in standard mode. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Okay, so I'm going to re-enable the auto refresh. So we get some traffic starting to load up here. And let me talk a little bit more about some of the auxiliary button stack features, etc. So you'll notice we've got a group of sliders here that have built out to the left of these pop-ups. And these are the two default sliders. The far left one controls your mouse. I'm sorry, controls all of the aircraft icons and labels sizes. It also controls the thickness of traces. We'll get into that. You may want to use this to make the targets smaller or larger, depending on how far you're zoomed in. If I turn on one of the labels, we'll talk about this a little bit later. Later, you'll see we've got some labels that pop up on each aircraft. It also scales those up or down. All right, so this leftmost vertical slider controls the aircraft scales, the scaling of all the different aircraft items. And then this first one, this is the relative height slider. This basically squishes and stretches out the relative height of all the aircraft based on their flight levels. So if you take this and drag it all the way down so it's fully depressed, that is actually actual aircraft altitude. All right, so when you're highly zoomed out like we are now, I mean, you basically have a flat map, right? I mean, what's the point? It's very hard to see who's at high, flying high and who's actually near the ground. So, one of the first innovations of SkyGlass is to use this relative height slider, click and drag it up, and it basically stretches everybody that's high up higher and everybody that's low, stays down low. These you'll basically need to kind of optimize or make adjustments depending on your map zoom level. If I let's zoom in on Florida a little bit. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to get my home location of my camera down in Florida. And then at the bottom of this auxiliary button stack, you'll see a map zoom. I'm going to click somewhere about middle, which is going to zoom me into that camera and home location. And you can see the map is updated. So now we've just got a sort of view of Florida. But you'll notice that as I zoomed out to kind of get a nice bird's eye view, the scale is a little bit off of all these aircraft. So I'm going to first scale up the sizes, and then I'm going to bring this relative height slider down so that we can see, who's actually on screen. If you don't do this, then any of the high flying aircraft, they're going to be off screen. So this is what you can dial this back down and get those high flying aircraft to a level that you can see them more easily. When you're zoomed all the way in, let's see here if I can. We'll double click on Miami. We'll find the Miami airport. Double click there. I'm going to change my home location to that. If you zoom really far in, so you're at like an airport level, we'll wait for the map to update here. Refresh all these tiles. Okay, cool. You can see now we were right dialed in on the airport itself. Then it may be useful to have this relative height slider all the way down, and then the flight levels are at a more natural place because you're so far zoomed in. All right. I'm going to quickly switch out of military mode into standard mode. And just so we can see some traffic around the Miami airport. I'm going to do a snapshot load, clicking on this top button. There we go. And you can see, so we got this one guy taken off, and you can see he's up a little bit, and then we've got some ground traffic here at the Miami airport. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back into military mode. By show of hands, how many folks are basically only watching military aircraft? Or is there okay, most people are, Ruth, how about you? Give me a hands up or down? Are you a military person? Or do you do some other standard stuff? I can only see the top of your head. Okay. You're okay, good. I got a wave. So if you want, you can use your anybody else, you're welcome to use the reactions and give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Anyway, okay, so most people are focused on military traffic. We'll talk a little bit more about how to get military in a standard mode, but I'll switch into military mode for now while we cover the rest of this UI.
Oh, and how did you get zoomed into there where it's showing the buildings and stuff?
Yeah. Okay, so in the auxiliary button stack, let me make this a little bit larger. In the auxiliary button stack at the bottom is this map zoom, and you'll see my slider is pretty far over to the right. This can go, down to a city block. It's really tight. So let me go ahead and do that just so you can see. And now, I mean, the entire airport is going to be in the field of view here. So you can get pretty close in. For me, typically, this is, unless I really want to see what's happening at a small airport or on a city block, if I'm trapped watching a police helicopter or something like that, not very useful, but it is there. I tend to keep my map zoom at a mid-level so I can see sort of a nice regional area, or if you want to get sort of a continental view, then you're going to be at this sort of higher end. You can click and drag the map zoom, but that's not as effective. I suggest clicking on the bar itself, which will move that slider. That way you give a chance, you give the map a chance for the tiles to load. By sliding them around, they really can't keep up with the map tile load. That's a kind of a soft spot within SkyGlass, something I don't really have a lot of control over. But let me try this. If you can also use these plus and minus buttons to sort of incrementally jump in and out. That can cause this sort of a weird error, which you can see here. Some of the tiles have loaded up, and you can tell some of them are kind of wonky. And so this middle button, this arrow in a circle, this refreshes, basically it dumps all the map tiles and redraws them. And that's a way to fix the tiles if they get a little squirrely. You can see I just did that and everything's back to sort of normal. Okay. Did that answer your question? The map zoom? Excellent. Okay, cool. So let me work myself up from the right-hand corner here on the auxiliary button stack. Again, just as review, bottom right-hand corner, this is the main stack, and then this next one is the auxiliary button stack. The bottom are the map controls, the map zoom controls. This next one governs some of the map-centric kind of features. You can turn on and off the vertical sliders. Let me cover that now. You can see there's a button on top of the vertical sliders. If you click on that, it exposes a couple of more sliders, which may be useful. This yellow and green bar is the mouse sensitivity. So if you want to, get a turbo mouse, you can drag that up. And now your mouse movements are much faster. If they're moving too fast, you can bring it down and then, get a very, very delicate sort of mouse. I like to keep mine about this mid area or in the lower quadrant. That seems natural for me, but depending on your mouse and how that's set up, you may want to adjust that. And then the second one is probably not useful for pretty much anybody, unless you're in a special sort of use case. But basically, this is the barometric pressure adjustment. Everything within SkyGlass, all the aircraft report their altitude in barometric pressure. And if you know anything about aviation, you'll know that changes all the time. It's sort of a variable thing. It's different from 1 mile to the next. So every airport has a different barometric pressure that's current based on the weather patterns. And so, and it's all aircraft broadcast in barometric pressure, which can mean that at an airport, you can have a barometric pressure even if an aircraft is sitting on the tarmac it can be lower than the field elevation, the actual, GPS ground elevation. So if you are zoomed in on a map, location like we were with Miami Airport, and traces or aircraft are flying sort of underneath the surface, you can use this barometric pressure to sort of, and you can see it sort of bumps up all the aircraft up and down, so you can sort of normalize for your use case. If you've made an adjustment and you want to reset it, this little thermometer icon in a square on the bottom, click that, and that brings everybody, it zeroes out any barometric changes. Most people are not going to use that, but again, it's a special case. And if you click on this button on the top of the slider grouping, again, that minimizes or hides those other not very commonly used sliders. All right, we've talked a little bit about the folded map here. This brings up different options for map styles. The default style is the satellite view. If y'all watch Monkey Works, he likes to use the satellite view. I'm going to change this to one of these top two, this sort of a darker view. I like this because it's really easy to see where the oceans are and the water bodies, and it gives a nice also geographic outline of some of these borders, rivers, etc. And it's really easy to see all the aircraft. That's kind of why I like that mode. You'll notice that the top 3 or 4 are sort of ideal for sort of a dark mode setting, and then the last several are more lighter map modes. These 2 in the lower area, you may want to check those out if you prefer a lighter screen. The difference is this one is sort of the standard map, and then the next one is the topographic map. So very similar, but just if you're zoomed in, you're going to get a little bit of feature distinction with the topo map. All right, so let me change the style again just by clicking on one of these swatches. And when you're zoomed in, you may want to have these bottom options enabled. This first one turns on map elevation, and the next one turns on and turns off the little previews of the buildings. You're not going to see much of a reaction here if you turn them on when you're zoomed out at this high level. And I will tell you, these are memory drains. So if you have a machine that you don't have a really souped up machine with a lot of RAM, this will increase the amount of RAM required, especially this buildings one, and it may slow down SkyGlass. So I have them off by default, but you can turn on map elevation and the buildings if you so choose. All right, so let me disable this pop-up here. I'm going to click on the folded map again. And this next one is the home location chooser. So I'll click on that. You'll see this pop-up show up on the left here, and it's got some information in it already. We were talking a little bit about the jumper before. Let me demonstrate that again. I'm going to jump somewhere or double click somewhere over East or West Texas. And you'll notice that jumper location where I've the reverse geolocation lookup is displayed here. This is actually an input panel. So if you click on the top, to the left of this target area, you'll see this is an input panel, input a new home location. This is a natural language input, meaning you can kind of throw almost anything at it, and it's going to go out to Google, kind of figure out what you said, and then interpret that as a location, go and look up the latitude and longitude, and then move to that location. So for example, I could type in LAX, and it's going to jump to the LA airport. Same with like DCA. Let's see if we can get that to fail. Oh, that works. Okay, most of the major airports, you can use the 3-letter designation for that airport, and it'll jump to it. Smaller airports like Leesburg, which is in Northern Virginia, it may or may not, or it might go to the wrong location. If you put the K in front of it, that's the, oops, let's see if we get that right. I'm still not finding that one. Let's use KWVI, Watsonville Airport. You may want to put the K in front of the 3-letter designation because that's actually how the ICAO, the standardized code for the airport. Or you can type in anything. You can type in New York and it'll understand that. You could even type in a street address, or you can put in an actual latitude and longitude. Anything you want to throw at it. Generally, you're going to be doing city or state names. Let's do Miami again. And you'll see that when you hit enter, or click on this target, it's going to complete that input and jump to that location. The latitude and longitude will be displayed here. And then you've also got this sort of search radius slider here on the bottom. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we're in standard mode. When you're in military mode, when mil mode loads all traffic worldwide that are military. So the search radius has no effect or impact. When you're in standard mode, however, that's when the search radius applies around your home location, the place that you have loaded up as your home. All right, so let me disable this target button. We'll lose the location chooser. You can see that goes away. All right, let's move up to the next group. This next one is this disables the various list panels, and we have 3. Starting on the left-hand side, this is your favorite locations list panel. And so we click on that. This is the only list panel that actually shows up on the right. The other ones show up on the left. You can see we've got a couple that are loaded by default. CONUS, again, that's continental United States and Europe. And then there's a little button here on the right of the header, favorite locations header. And that, if I click on it, is basically going to add whatever home location that I have currently defined as a new favorite. So this is how you can build up your favorite locations. So let me work that example. I'm going to click on the target in this second row here to bring up the location chooser. Let's put in a different location. I'll put in SFO, San Francisco Airport. Click enter. My home location has now been moved. You can see by the camera moving. You can also tell the top left-hand corner readout says SFO. And then if I click on the plus sign and with the little reverse teardrop, boom, you can see that favorite location has now been added to my favorite locations list panel. Okay, let me make this absurdly large so we can really see it more easily. So these entries have a few different functionalities. You can delete them by clicking on the teardrop of the X. So let me clear out San Francisco. You can edit the name by clicking on this far right with it's got a little teardrop with a pencil. If you click on that, this makes this an input panel. And so you can change the name of your favorite location. It's not going to do a reverse geocode lookup or anything like that. It's just renaming it for your favorite location label. Hitting enter will lock that change in. And let me do that again for like Europe. I'm going to click on the pencil. That makes this an input panel. Let me back out some of the other letters. I'm going to click enter on my keyboard, and that updates the name. Okay, and you'll see it reorganized. Basically, it pulls it out, adds it up again, and all the new entries sort of populate at the bottom. So the other functionality, this may be a little bit of a subtle but very important one. You'll notice that we've got this target icon that looks like the bottom target of the jumper. And then we have CONUS, let's say, or the name of the shortcut itself. If you click on the name of the shortcut or your favorite location, it will change the home location to be that. All right. If you use the jumper icon, it simply moves the camera. It does not change the home location. All right. So let me demonstrate. If I click on the Miami area target, you'll see the map doesn't pop. It actually slides. It zooms over to that new location. Doing that to CONUS, you'll see it's going to slide right back. But you'll notice if I click on the Miami jumper target here, it has not been updated on the top left, right? It still says CONUS. If I click on the word itself, now you'll see it updates in those couple areas. The location chooser will update, and the top left-hand corner location, current home location, will update there as well. All right. This has an important distinction in that if you jump, if it pops, if you click on the word itself, it basically reloads the map from that center location. If you slide over to it, it does something a little bit different. So as you can see, as I translate the map around, it's gonna, as I get a little farther, the tiles sort of fill in. The tiles, depending on your settings and what zoom level and what map you've chosen, may take longer to populate from a jump. Meaning, if you jump over to EU, you can see all those tiles are starting to, they fill in eventually. If I slide, then they may come in a little bit faster. You'll see that they kind of tiled in real easy and quickly. All right, let me do that again. I'm going to jump over to, fly over to Conus by using the target. Let me do the same example in both ways. So now I'm going to zoom again. You can see the map sort of fills in. Now I'm going to jump using the word itself, and you'll see a little bit different behavior. These map tiles will cache. So depending on your map, your computer's RAM level, etc., it may be quick. The other distinction is when you pop like this and use the favorite locations label itself to move, it basically wipes all of the target information, all the aircraft, and has to re-render them. All right. When you're just loading traffic, you may not even see a difference. Like in this mode, it's fine. If you have 24-hour traces loaded for all aircraft, it's going to take some time to wipe all those and then redraw them. It's much faster if you just zoom using the little jumper. All right. So you'll notice if you're like, oh, I'm trying to, jump to that new location, it's taken forever to sort of repopulate. It's probably because you have some of these other functions enabled. There's a lot to re-render, and this may be a little faster if you just zoom around. Okay. But again, if you zoom using the little jumper, it's not changing your home location. Again, if you're in mill mode, probably won't matter. You just want to move the map. If you're in standard mode, that has a huge impact. Okay. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. So I've gone into overwhelming depth on the favorite locations. Let me disable that. I'm going to turn off the location chooser as well. We'll clean up our interface. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. All right. So next one is your favorite aircraft, your watch list. Clicking on that will open up your watch list. I have wiped my watch list before we got started here, so you're not going to see anything. If you're starting from the from zero or you're brand new user. So let me talk about watch list functionality in general and in brief. So few things you'll notice right from the auxiliary button stack. This banner is the sort of SkyGlass centric symbol for all things that are watch list related. Okay. We haven't quite talked about this much, but on the top right-hand corner, we've got this, let me scale the UI a little bit. I'm going to turn off the pop-up help just so it's not too distracting. We've got this on the top right-hand corner, we have this, what's called the HUD, the heads-up display. As you mouse over any of these aircraft in the field, you'll notice that HUD updates to that aircraft information. What I want to draw your attention to is this banner icon in the leftmost top of this HUD. This will show if your aircraft is on the watch list. It also serves as a button. So if I click on it, that button's going to turn green, and you'll notice now we've got this new entry in our watch list in an unassigned group. Okay. The other way to add aircraft to a watch list is, well, basically anytime you see a banner associated with an aircraft, clicking on that banner will toggle it either on or off. The other very quick way to do it is if you see an aircraft in the field, let me click on this NA. That's going to jump over to his location, put the camera to his location. If I right click on the aircraft, icon, or actually on the chevron down below, that's going to add it to the watch list immediately. To take it off the watch list, you can load it up into the HUD and disable it, and that'll remove it, as you can see there. So that's a really fast way to jump around and add things to your watch list, is just to right click on an aircraft. You'll notice the background color and the border color of the aircraft icon panel that will change, showing that you've got that aircraft on the watch list. Let me do that again for that guy and this guy, build up a few. So now you've got a kind of quick visual indicator of what's on your watch list and what isn't. Okay. All right. So I'm going to come back to the watch list in a second. Let me talk about the aircraft icons now. It seems like a natural place. Okay, so if the jumper is on and you click on an aircraft, that's going to move your camera to that aircraft's position. All right, that's important because if I scroll in here, you'll see that purple target is actually right at the aircraft's position or where it last was loaded. Okay, the important thing to note there is the center of rotation, again, is this purple target. It's now been moved off of the map surface. Okay, that can be a little strange for people because now as you rotate, you can see we're rotating about that aircraft instead of on the map. So a couple ways to bring that center pivot point of your camera down to the bottom. You can, if your jumper's on, you can double click on the map. You can see that brings it down, or you can use this option drag, and you can see that moves the center of the rotation about that place. All right, so let me click on this aircraft again. It's going to move it to that area. And now let me tell you about the different pieces of the display. So I'm going to turn off auto refresh just so it doesn't mess with this a little bit. Okay, the chevron itself, you can see as I hover, it gets this little green 3D box around it. That is the actual aircraft position representation. Okay, so the chevrons show the actual position of the aircraft in space based on your map zoom and the elevation height adjustment slider. Okay, the top aircraft profile icon and this octagon, that's just giving you some more information. So let me tell you about that. The icon is its closest match to what type of aircraft it is. If it's a known type and a common type like a C-17, it'll probably be quite accurate. If it is an unknown type, meaning it hasn't been matched to one of the, I've got about 45 different icons themselves. There are thousands of different aircraft types. And we've got about 200 or so that have been, dialed into the database. If it doesn't know, if it doesn't have a specific lookup, then it looks up the aircraft category that's displayed, the ICAO category, such as like large aircraft, super big, something smaller aircraft, airship, things like that, and it'll match, one of those 6 different categories to that icon. Okay, the octagon is important because the rotation of that icon around that octagon is kind of like a compass face. This is showing the heading of that aircraft if this octagon was a compass face. So you can tell here this guy's moving southwest, and we can see if we look at the heading indicator in this pop-up panel, 233 degrees, that matches. You'll notice this guy, he's going north 1 degree, his heading is 1 degree. All right, so let me talk about those a little bit, the pop-up panels. If I hover over an aircraft, a few things happen. We've got a pop-up panel above the aircraft itself, and that mimics in the HUD on the top right. All right, moving from the top to bottom, on the top left, you've got the aircraft type that's being reported by the aircraft. Okay, and then the right-hand side is the call sign, the current call sign. This next middle row on the left below the type is the current squawk code or transponder code. And then as we move to the right, the next is the registration number of the aircraft, sometimes known as the tail number, the country code, That's a lookup that's not actually broadcast by the aircraft. And then the far right-hand corner, this in this example, AE123E, that is the hexadecimal code of the transponder. For those that are new to aviation or tracking these aircraft, the call sign may change every flight. It may change even mid-flight. So you can't rely on the call sign to identify an aircraft over time. The registration is better because that stays with the aircraft, but the transponder code, that's really the go-to. This Alpha Echo 123 Echo, that 6-digit hexadecimal code, that is the unique identifier for the transponder itself. And unless that transponder gets swapped out for maintenance or some other reason, that's going to maintain through every flight of that aircraft. Okay, most other flight tracking systems, you can look up using the hex code. All of my background when I do queries on hitting the ADSB exchange system to find aircraft, it's all hex related. And you can add aircraft from directly from a hex code into the watch list. So the hex code is something important to know. Most important to know about that, again, it doesn't change flight by flight by flight. It stays with the aircraft. Okay, one of the few things that actually do. Okay, the bottom row of this pop-up panel are the telemetry. Far left is the altitude, current altitude. Next grouping is the altitude change. If it's flying up or down, and the feet per minute change is listed there. And then the piece in blue is the current speed of the aircraft, and then the final one on the right is the heading. So in this example, 452 knots and heading of 233.2 degrees. And again, all this stuff is mimicked in the HUD on the top right. If you'll notice, as I move my mouse over a few of these fields, there's a little green box around it. Anytime you see a box around it that's green, or the letters turn green themselves, that means that this is clickable, and that moves that information, whatever you're hovering over, onto your clipboard. So if you want to grab the hex code quickly onto your clipboard, just click on it. You'll see it turned orange and then went away. That means now that information is on my clipboard. I can go send it to a friend or do a lookup somewhere else. The registration number, you can do that here. And again, the call sign, can grab that by putting it on the clipboard. Not all fields will do that, but some of them will. Okay. Talking a little bit more about the HUD. If the aircraft has been plane spotted, and that is part of the Plane Spotter network. Plane Spotter is a great website where people that go out and take photographs of aircraft upload their photographs, tagged to a specific aircraft, and so that they have a free API I can pull those aircraft images from. If it exists, it'll grab it. If it doesn't exist, hasn't been plane spotted and uploaded, it will show image not available. But a surprising number of, especially military aircraft, have been spotted. If you click on the image itself, it's going to load up a larger preview. And then if you notice on the bottom right-hand corner, next to the image credits, if you click on that, that's going to actually open up the Plane Spotter website page to that aircraft. So you can get a little bit further detail about it. Clicking on the icon or the image itself will bring it back down to its standard size. All right. And then you have to the left of this HUD, you've got some further functions. We've already talked about the banner icon. We're not going to talk about flight history reporting in this session, but this is how you would pull a flight history report for that single aircraft. These next three govern, let me make this a little bit smaller. They govern some additional panels that pop up below the HUD. By default, we have one enabled, which is the location lookup and some further detail about the type. You'll notice if I hover over different aircraft, this lower section does a reverse geocode lookup and then gives me a vector and a distance of its location with the local time, and then the current latitude and longitude will be displayed there. If I click on this tower icon next to it, we'll see another pop-up will be displayed. If we hover over different aircraft. In military mode, this isn't going to give you a whole lot of information. I'll demonstrate this again. We're in standard mode, but basically it's going to give you the some more detail about the transponder and the aircraft's equipment. If the you'll even get stuff like the nav mode. You'll see if it has autopilot on, if it's engaged, if it has a TCAS, which is a collision avoidance system. Some of that stuff will get displayed here in the nav mode. The category of the aircraft will show in the ICAO CAT line, and the source type. This will show what type of transponder is being received. You know, if what mode the transponder is in. For most military aircraft, you're not going to get that information, but when you're in standard mode, you'll get things like ADS-B, which is the controlled airspace standard that all transponders need to be in ADS-B mode. That stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. If you see a mode S in this source line, that means that they're transponding with this sort of older frequency technology, what came before ADS-B. What's important to note is that mode S has a lower resolution. You could say it has it's not as precise as ADS-B. And this last line, this RAD-C, stands for radius and containment. And that will give you this sort of confidence level in meters of that reported location. And you'll notice that, you know, mode S will either not have a RAD-C, or the RAD-C will be much larger, several hundred meters, whereas most of these other aircraft that have a known ADS-B broadcast, they'll have a very tight RAD-C of like 15 meters or 75 meters, something much smaller. Okay. The last one, so let me disable those. You can see they go away. This last one is the database lookup for that aircraft. And you'll see if we turn it on, we get another pop-up here, aircraft database details. And I have not loaded the database in this session for SkyGlass, so it's going to give me a prompt, says we have a need to load the database. I'll click on OK, and we'll see this takes just a moment. If you're on a very slow computer, that may take up to a minute. But this is loading over 500,000 different records of all the aircraft that are known by the ADS-B system, ADS-B exchange system. And let me do a refresh here. Update everybody's location. And we'll see a couple things change. Wait for that to update. There we go. A couple things change. When that database HUD toggle is on, we get a new pop-up at the bottom of the aircraft panel, which gives in military mode, it's going to do a country code lookup. If you're in standard mode, it'll actually go out to the database and pull the owner operator and display that here, as well as some other detail about the aircraft, the model, the year, and the hex code. Again, if you'll see that that's turned green. So clicking on that will pull all of this information onto your clipboard. So it's kind of a quick way to troll, for owner operators if you're in standard mode. Okay. There is a performance hit. I'll tell you that. Doing these lookups for the database can slow things down. So if you want to disable, you can. You'll notice when the database is open, we've got this other little pop-up here. If you click on the international no symbol, that's going to unload the database and sort of take it out of memory, and also take it out of service, in the sense it's not going to do those lookups on the back end, which will increase your performance. Okay. All right, so we've covered the HUD. Let me, while we're here, just talk about this top right-hand corner, the aircraft counts. I'm going to make this a little bit lower just because I know in the recording, my camera sort of shows up here. So in the very top right-hand corner, we've got several fields here that talk about the counts. So again, we're in military mode. When you load the aircraft, all the returns are going to be counted in this last load. If the aircraft is flying, meaning it's not on the ground, or it's not so old that it doesn't have a good position, it's going to show as showing. And then it will give you a breakdown of the different types, military, mast, and everything else is standard. So right now we have 434 showing. Again, mil count's going to be the same because we're in mil mode. There's a 0 on the masked count, which makes sense. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we're in standard mode. And then this last one refers to how many aircraft have been removed from view from the last load based on the sweeper, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the sweeper basically will remove stale aircraft from view based on how long your auto refresh is set. Okay, so as you'll see, we load again, that number is going to change. If we're in auto refresh mode, there will probably be very few that are removed from view. If you're meaning, you know, in only a few seconds, only maybe a very few aircraft are going to be either off screen, meaning they're no longer reporting, or they've landed, or they've just come on, something like that. So that if they've been removed, again, you will see that number here. The on screen is kind of cool though. That is literally telling you only what you're seeing on screen. So if I jump over to Florida again, and I kind of change my view so that I only see what's in this local area, you'll see the on-screen count number changes to just what I can actually see on screen. And as I zoom out, you'll see that number rapidly increases. But this is a nice way to see, for example, over CONUS, only those aircraft that are on screen versus the full active military aircraft worldwide, which is this 559 or 431 showing. Okay. All right, so let me expand this again. All right, let me pause here for questions. Any questions up to this point? If you do, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask away. Okay. No questions. Perfect. All right, so I'll press on. Okay, so working up from the auxiliary button stack, we were at the list panels. We covered the favorite locations panel, the watch list. Let me talk about the type list panel. Clicking on this icon will bring up the type list panel, which populates on the bottom left. You'll notice in the top of this header, there's a little box here. You can click and resize the type list panel, and it's going to automatically adjust the columns based on the height. So you can easily like make this, stretch it around so that you can see all the different types. For our purposes, I'm going to just give it sort of one column here. The type list panel has, let's talk about the header first. The far left corner, basically that's going to close the type list. You've got a couple of icons here. The one I want to focus on at the moment is this sorting icon. The type list is sorted by default by count. Okay, so basically it's doing a gathering of all the different aircraft that are in the last return. It's organizing them by aircraft type and then ranking them based on the counts. So we've got a lot of text 2s, T-38s, the counts, and they'll update with every refresh. If you click on this sorting button, then it reorganizes them into alphabetic mode. So if you're looking for a specific type, it's going to be much easier. Like, oh, I want to see the Q4s. It's going to be much easier to flip it into alphabetical mode, and then you can easily, find the type that you're looking for. When it's in count mode, especially if it's, a single aircraft or in the low numbers, it might be hard to find like the P3s, the P8s, Q4s, etc., because they're such low numbers, and who knows where they're going to show up in the list, right? Okay, so let me pop this back into alphabetic mode and bring this down to a single view. You'll notice that we have a couple more things in this in each aircraft entry. The icon is the far left, and we have the aircraft type displayed there. Then we've got the count, and then you can turn on traces for all aircraft in that type category. And then we've got a little swatch here of the trace color itself. We'll talk about that in a second. so let me pop it back into count mode, and let me find the C-17s. All right, if I left click on the type entry, a few things will happen. One, it shows that entry as now blue, which means it's in isolate mode. And so what you'll see, you can tell in the field, now I only have C-17s that are showing up. So I basically wiped all the other aircraft from view. They're still loaded in memory, but I've wiped them from view, and I'm only looking at the C-17s. If I left click again, it brings it out of isolate mode, and we've got all the aircraft back. But you can gang these up. So I'll pick the C-17s. I'm going to click on K-35Rs, and now you can see we've got more in the field. We also have this other panel that pops up, which are the list of all those aircraft of those types, and they'll keep adding to. So let me pull the K-35Rs out, right click or left clicking again. And so now we've got the list of these aircraft of all the C-17s. You'll notice we've got a few of these C-17s that we've been added to the watch list already. By clicking on any of these banners, it'll add them to the watch list right from this aircraft list panel. If you click on any of these entries, you'll notice it'll zoom to that aircraft location. So if you want to jump to that aircraft, you can click it here in the aircraft list panel. Make sense? All good? All right, good. Okay, so the opposite of isolate mode is hide mode. So if you right click, let me get the field here a little bit easier to see. If you right click on an aircraft type, it's going to turn it red, and it'll remove those from the field. So you'll notice in Monkey Sit Reps, this is what he does to remove the Text 2s and the T-38s. Oops. By right clicking on a couple of these entries, you're going to pull them from the field. And like in this mode now, you can see by pulling those two types out, which are generally trainer types, we can see sort of more of an active military aircraft count in our HUD on the very top right. So right now over CONUS, we've got 276 because we've taken out this 100 plus 108 training type aircraft. That makes sense? Okay, so let's say you've gone through these types, and we've got a bunch that are sort of loaded. We've got a few that are isolated, and you may have moved into alphabetic mode, so they may or may not be on the screen. You're like, I want to get them back to sort of, basic view. That is this two arrows in a circle icon in the type list header. Clicking on that will remove all of the isolated or hidden selections that you've made, and refresh the type list panel back to sort of normal view. Okay. All right. So let's play around with traces a little bit while we're here. Okay. So there are several ways to activate traces in SkyGlass. You can do it from the aircraft type list panel. Let's do that now, just to make it interesting. I'm going to click on the C-17s again to isolate that mode. And I'm going to click on the little button here with the traces. And you'll notice first, though, in the main button stack, traces haven't been enabled yet, right? But if you click on any of these traces or enable them from any other area, it will automatically turn that on. Okay. The main distinction, though, when traces are enabled, you get this other pop-up panel. This is circle or got a border of magenta here with a trace depth slider and then a couple of options. Okay. The default is 30 minutes. If we increase that to 3 hours, you can see these traces will be wiped, and then they'll be redrawn based on the new length. You can go as far out as 24 hours. Again, this is a lot of data. So trace data, it's interesting. Traces are captured every 5 seconds, right? So one 24-hour trace is actually more data than all aircraft positions that are currently flying, like in mil mode. Okay, so just know that you've got a performance hit if you dial things up to 24 hours and you've got multiple things enabled. All right, I will show you. You may have noticed. Let me try and recreate this little bug. Sometimes, as if you redraw the traces, you'll get, there we go. You'll get a line that looks a little like impossible. like from here all the way down to the origin. If something doesn't look right, just click on the depth again, and it's going to redraw those lines, and it should, we change the depth, that might probably help as well. And it'll remove some of those artifacts. So if you see something that doesn't really look natural, here we go. Seems to be acting up quite a bit. Like it moves from you've got a trace line that's very faint that moves from the ending trace right to the aircraft. That's an anomaly I'm still trying to bug fix. So just reloading them or changing the depth should fix that. Okay. Going back to the type list panel, you notice we've got a little swatch next to the the trace icon. If you click on that swatch, it pulls up this little color picker. And this is how you can adjust the colors for that these traces. So traces in SkyGlass are all type centric, okay? Meaning that you can dial in different colors for each different type of aircraft. When you first download and run SkyGlass, it basically does a randomization, picks random start and finish colors for all the different types, but then you can adjust them by clicking on the swatch, and then you've got a couple different things. So let's change the trace colors from, let's start it with green and end it with a blue. And you'll notice on screen, these colors are updating. Just to note, start is oldest aircraft position. So kind of where it took off is the start, and it ends right at the tail of the aircraft. Okay. So the ending position is the most recent trace position. Okay. So this might be a nice way for you to like dial in, reds for the heavy lifters and, blues for a different class. And then you can kind of see quickly, when when traces are enabled for all those different classes. Let's do an example here. I'm going to turn off the traces for the C-17. So those will go away. I'm going to pick the K-35Rs. I'm going to take the C-17s out. I'm going to turn those traces on. You'll notice that we've got a trace color that's sort of dark that's been grabbed by default. So that doesn't show up very well depending on the map style. You'll notice like some of these traces, like I really can't see where it ends right on the aircraft because it ends with a darker color. So you can just pick a new color. Let's make that a nice bright yellow. And you'll see, now they pop up really easily, right? And you may want to do that on purpose. So if you'll notice in the color picker little swatch here, the high elevation, this top area is whiter, and then the bottom area is darker. So if we click on the start that's dark, you can see now it kind of fades out to a nice dark color. Before I did SkyGlass, I ran my own animation studio, so I'm very visual centric. So I like to think, I like pretty colors and nice contrast, stuff like that. So if you're so inclined like me, you can really dial these into however you like. All right, so we'll leave that there. That is kind of pretty. I like that. Okay. So again, this is where by clicking on the swatch, you've got control over the different start and end colors. And if you've got a darker end color, you may want to adjust those for visibility depending on your map style. I like the dark maps, so I like these bright trace colors. If you have a light map enabled, these bright trace colors may not be visible, so you may want to darken them up, right? Depending again on your preference. Okay, so let me turn off the traces for that type and disable isolate mode for the K-35Rs. And now we've got all our aircraft back. Okay. All right, so I think this is a good time to talk about, well, let me keep going through the auxiliary button stack. So we covered the type list panel and the watch list panel and the other favorite locations panel. The next row up, these are kind of like resets in SkyGlass. So this first one, 2 arrows in a square, that resets the camera, position, orientation, etc. You'll notice if my rotation position is on the map surface, I can rotate the camera to where I'm underneath the map and the map will go away, right? Which makes sense to me, but it may be a little weird for some other folks. If you have your camera in a weird position and you don't know how to get it back, by clicking on these two arrows in a square, that's going to reset your camera to the last home location and bring it up to an elevation and position that's normal. All right. So let me give you another example of that. I'm going to pull up the favorite locations panel. I'm going to click on, I'm going to zoom over to CONUS. I'm going to go ahead and change my home location to CONUS. All right. You'll notice now that everything has been ganged up there. I'm going to make my camera weird and wonky. And now if I click on these two arrows in a square, it's going to reset my camera to something normal. I know where I'm at. I'm at a sort of natural position in 3D space. And there we go. Okay, so that's the first thing, resetting the camera. Let me turn on the pop-up help just so we get those visual indicators as well. So reset the camera's location and rotation. The next one is the stop button. Stop button will basically stop any current loading action within SkyGlass. So depending on what you're doing, you may have gotten yourself in a position where, oh my gosh, I loaded all traces, for 24 hours for all aircraft, and it's just it's bogging me down. It's slow. Something is, it feels bogged down. By clicking the stop button, you can stop all loading action. You'll notice I was in auto refresh mode. I'm clicking the stop button, which stopped that current loading action and also turned off auto refresh. Okay. This final one, this is something I actually use a ton of, the burn button. And basically it just wipes everything from view. It will unload all aircraft and all traces and anything else that you've got sort of loaded up. So when I'm moving, between sort of missions in SkyGlass, I may, burn to clear all, and then I'm kind of starting from a clean slate, and then I can load up traffic again and do what I need to do. So that may be very useful depending on what you're doing within SkyGlass. So burn button clears the slate. Okay, the burn button as well as the stop button will turn off auto refresh. Okay, so let me turn auto refresh back on. And let me show you something I haven't quite covered yet. You'll notice there's a little readout here on top of the auxiliary button stack. Right now it says loading 12 seconds ago. Basically, that's telling you the age of your last load cycle. Okay, if you have auto refresh on, that's going to stay, every time it auto refreshes, it's going to reset to 0. We have auto refresh as 15 seconds. So you'll notice every 15 seconds, boom, it switches back. If I turn off auto refresh, this is where it becomes important because, most of us want to see what's happening now, right? And we may or may not know how long ago it was loaded if you're working in the snapshot mode. So this is your little tell on, do you have fresh aircraft or is it stale? So depending on where we had auto refresh, we had it in 15 seconds before. So as this gets out to 3 times the auto refresh, this color will change. So let's wait for a few seconds while this turns it. At 45, it should go yellow, and then it'll turn red if it gets even longer, saying, hey, your aircraft is stale. You're not really looking at clean locations there. So you get turned yellow. And then if it gets over 4x, it's going to turn red, saying, hey, you really, your old aircraft now, everything's stale. Okay. So let me turn auto refresh back on, and we'll keep going here. So I'm not going to talk about all of the functionality here, but we'll cover the important ones. First, the sweeper is on by default. Again, this will remove all aircraft that are stale. If it, and by stale, that means if it hasn't refreshed in the last 3 auto refresh cycles, okay? Meaning aircraft is landed or it stopped transponding. If you don't have the sweeper on, it's gonna just hang out in space, right? And you won't update and you'll get, kludgy returns. It is useful in certain cases to turn off the sweeper, meaning if you flip into standard mode, so you're in a search radius area and you want to monitor all aircraft that have come through in a certain amount of time, you can turn off the sweeper and just sit on that aircraft, let SkyGlass run for several hours, and any aircraft that traverses that area, its last known position, it'll just stay there. So you can kind of get a count or a view of all the different aircraft that have come through. It's kind of an edge case, but that may be a useful way to, useful for you too, when it's appropriate to turn off the sweeper. Otherwise, you want to keep that on. All right. This search button, magnifying glass, click on that. It will pop up another panel in this auxiliary pop-up area, and where you can enter and search on different ways. Let me turn on the pop-up help again. You can search by hex code. You can search by call sign, which is this next button. You can search by tail number or registration number, or you can search by the squawk code. So let's work that example. Let me pull one up onto the HUD. I'm going to hover and click. So now that SAM 947 is on my clipboard. I'm going to burn. So I clear the field. And then in this search radius, I'm going to click to where it says enter. I'm going to paste. So now we've got the SAM 97, and I'm going to click search by call sign. Aha, it didn't load. All right, this is a good example. So you'll see we got a little pop-up here that shows, hey, did it find it or not? Let's investigate. So let me reload the list. Let me find that aircraft again, somewhere over here, right? Oh, now I can't find it. SAM 7. Okay, let me turn on the call sign. Oh, there it is, 947. Okay, and let me turn on the tower icon and see. Oh, no, we're not really getting. So it may be, so detailed probably isn't useful for you, but or may or may not be interesting for you. All these different modes have different API calls that I can make, and there are some variations on what is returned in those calls. Generally, this search is quite good in the sense it's got a nice wide net. Others are not. If you are searching, in military mode, it may or may not get all those aircraft that are transponding with a mode S, for example. So let me work this example a different way. So we know that this SAM 97 is not coming up a call sign. Let me search. I'm going to put the hex code on the clipboard. I'm going to clear the field. I click here in the input area. I'm going to back out what we had before and paste. And then let's search on hex code. Boy, that one failed too. Oh, I'm sorry. I clicked on the wrong button. All right, click hex code. There we go. So it was able to find it from the hex code, but unable to do it from the call sign. Interesting, anomaly here. Again, the military mode actually aggregates from a different service, or not for different service, but it aggregates. They do some back-end processing to kind of bring things into military mode. So I wish I had more control over this aspect, but it's good we found an example of something that's kind of anomalous. All right, so let me load the aircraft, all aircraft back up. You'll notice that the in this mode it was reporting as a no call sign. But when we're in military mode, it actually can find its call sign. So there are some variations. Okay. All right. So while I'm at it, let me talk about the filter icon here on the middle center of this top group here. Will let me clean up the interface a little bit more. Let me turn off the search, turn off traces. So we've just got this. Let me turn off the vertical sliders. Let me turn off the favorite locations. Okay. So this filter icon will turn on and off these different declutter filter features of SkyGlass. So by default, when you're in military mode, this top group is not enabled because it's not practical. Because you're in military mode, you're already seeing, it's already being filtered for military classes. The 4 classes were kind of genus, I guess you could say. I'm not really sure what the Latin word for that kind of grouping is, but it's sort of this highest level distinction. A standard aircraft is anything that has not been flagged as military or masked. Okay, military, that's sort of obvious. It's been flagged in the back end process or in the databases as a military type of aircraft. Masked aircraft are very interesting. So there are two programs within the FAA. One is a little bit more obscure. It's called PIA, Private Aircraft Information Association. That is very few aircraft are going to be in that class, but there you may see a few. Most of them are in this other category called LAD. LAD stands for Limited Aircraft Data Display, and it is a program that the FAA provides to aircraft owners. It's basically kind of a pay-to-play. You pay your fee, register with this LAD program, and what the FAA does is any of its public feeds, they scrub that data before it is released to the public. Okay, SkyGlass sources aircraft position data from the fabulous folks at the ADSB Exchange Network, and they don't have contractual obligations with the FAA, so they don't have to filter the aircraft positions. Other flight services, I won't name names, they get some of that information from the FAA, so they are either required to filter or they just don't get it because they're getting the data from the FAA to begin with. This is not to say, that like they can turn their transponder off or something like that. No, when they're in controlled airspace, they're got to be broadcasting with a transponder. It just means that when that data is then broadcast out or made available to the public via an API or through a website, something like that, that's when it's actually filtered away. Okay, so that is the what I call in SkyGlass the masked category. Generally, that's going to be LAD aircraft. And like I said, anything that doesn't fall into military or masked defaults to a standard aircraft. Let me pause for questions and take a drink. Any questions? If so, go ahead and just unmute and ask away. All right. All right, so I either caught everybody after food and they're just not ready to ask questions, or I'm being incredibly thorough. All right, no problem. Moving on. So in the declutter pop-ups here, we have this other panel at the bottom, and this will, as you can see, the middle one is on, which has it basically turns on the pop-up panels for all aircraft that are on screen. Okay. All right. I hear somebody unmuted. Did they want to say something? No.
Ann had a question or Ruth Ann had a question for you.
Where? Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I see it in the chat. Where is that?
I unmuted.
Yes.
The question I had but it was a while ago, but I can still see it. Down by Florida and other places, there's these little odd shaped, like red and green figures.
Yes.
What are those?
Okay, I forgot to cover this when we were talking about the chevrons. So the chevrons, these little triangles. Hold on one second. Like I said, that the chevrons are they represent the actual aircraft position itself.
Oh, okay.
Let me get something on screen here. So, and this is a perfect question for this context. So let me turn off the aircraft icons for everything, and now we're just left with the chevrons. Okay. So the chevrons are color-coded based on what the aircraft's doing. Okay. This sort of cyan or light blue means that it's level flight. Red means that it's descending, and green means that it's climbing or ascending. Okay.
Okay.
The default, you're welcome. The default view in SkyGlass is to have these aircraft icons on. That's the only part of this these pop-up panels that is displayed unless you hover over the aircraft. But if you click on any of these other ones, then different pieces will be turned on for all aircraft. Like you can see here, we've got the type and the hex code. I'm sorry, type in the transponder code. This next one is the call sign and registration hex code. And then this last one is the telemetry. And you can have on, any or all of them. So now we've just got the telemetry up for all aircraft. Again, the more that's displayed, these are all memory hits, right? So if you have all these things turned on, SkyGlass is going to run a little bit slower. And if you've got a sensitive machine, you can really see a difference. Even on here, you can see as I rotate, I don't know if it's that clear on Zoom, but I can see it actually strobes just a little bit. Okay, because it has to do a lot more thinking and displaying because we're in this 3D environment. Okay, so this is a good time to move into standard mode and cover those distinctions. All right, so in order to switch into standard mode, it's very simple. You click on the shield, so we're toggling off the mill mode. We're in standard mode. Let's pick a location. Who votes for West Coast? East Coast. East Coast. All right, drop an actual location in the chat, and I'll go there. We'll make this a little bit more interactive. I should have some nice hold music. Da, 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 da. All right, New York. Anywhere specific in New York? We'll just do let's do New York. Perfect. And DC. Well, we'll do both. Okay, great. Oops. I just put in New York in the chat. All right. Let me do it on this where I'm supposed to be. New York. Hit enter, and we've moved over. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom the map a little bit more, and you'll see we've got this green box. This green box is the visual representation of the search radius that we can dial in with this slider. Okay. So let me do something nice and manageable. Let's do 30 miles, 35 miles. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to turn. Let's just do it. I'm going to load that snapshot. Okay, and let's see here. We've got about 100 and I can't see the top of my screen. There we go. 155 aircraft. Okay, and I'm guaranteeing we've missed some on the top. So let me bring the sliders on and bring this relative height slider down. And now, now we can see all the aircraft. This makes more sense. So I'm going to dial this to what seems sort of natural to me. And let me increase the size a little bit more, 50 miles, reload. Okay, good. Now we've got all three types represented. So you'll notice we've got a bunch of blue aircraft. These are all going to be standard commercial or private aircraft. We have one military on screen. He's got different background, different icon color. And then we've got a handful of these masked aircraft. All right. Let me, so you can see the magentas are clearly, easy to see. So with this declutter panel, you can turn on or off any of those or all of those aircraft types or classes rather. So let me turn off the normies. And now we're just left with just masked aircraft and military. You can do the same thing. We turn off the mask. Now we're just left with the military aircraft. Okay. This is how you can get a non-worldwide view of just military, right? So you go into standard mode and you basically turn off everybody except for the military aircraft. All right. So this is a really important piece of information here. Again, it all depends on your computer, but almost all computers, once you've got about somewhere between 500 and 1,000 aircraft painted on screen, it's going to drop to a crawl. Okay. And it is incredibly fast and easy to get way more than 1,000 aircraft if you're in standard mode and you have normies on. Okay. We're at 232, we're at 50 miles. Let's say if I bump this up to 200 miles, reload, you can see it already starts to slow down as it paints. Okay. And this will, it gets to an excruciating crawl, like one aircraft a second. It's just horrible. This is an example where like, I've loaded too many, I need to stop. Click on that stop button and it arrests what's happening. Okay. And then you can make some changes. You can either dial down your search radius to something manageable, or you can turn off a class. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this down to 50 miles and I'll load. And you can see that's much faster load. We've got all these other aircraft that are still stale. Let me turn on auto refresh. Let me dial the auto refresh down. Well, it did that immediately. As soon as that auto refresh happened, the sweeper was on and it cleared out all those stale traffic. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so when you're in standard mode, I can't stress this enough, you have to tune your search radius to your computer's capability. Anything more than about 100 miles, if you have normies on, will most likely bog you down, especially unless you're over like Montana, right? When there's, it's like your search radius, once it gets to a place where it's got several hundred aircraft plus loading, it's going to slow down. Any major metro area, that's going to be easy to do. If we're in 100 miles, that's probably going to be fine. You can see it painted in nice and quick. Okay. All right. I tell you, when I was coding SkyGlass and I made this class distinction, I was shocked to see how many aircraft are in the mask program. Isn't that incredible? So like I said, there were two mask programs, LAD, which is the most common one, and then there's the PIA. PIA is, there's only a handful of aircraft that I've ever seen flying within the PIA program. Those aircraft will be masked, but they're going to have a different color icon. The background and the octagon frame will be purple, but it will have a green icon. And just so you know, so the LAD program is just like pay to play to be scrubbed, but the transponders are consistent. The PIA is a different kind of a program. Transponder manufacturers, for example, or people that do that kind of work, they're testing different equipment in aircraft. They're actually given a block of transponder hex codes that they can transition through at will, and that's what's the distinction between the LAD and the PIA. So PIAs have kind of this they're enabled to have like rolling hex codes in their aircraft, and they're a special distinction. Anyway, so if you see one that shows up as green, that's the only ones that have the PIA designation. Okay, so if you have normies off, you can go nuts with your search radius. So let me dial up sort of the CONUS view again. I'm going to zoom way out. I'm going to pull up the favorite locations panel. I'm going to home to CONUS, and I'm going to blow out my search radius. See, and we still are limited to a few hundred. We got 623 showing, and so it's easy to paint all, render this number of aircraft. Okay, we could even add in the military, and we're gonna push the limit a little bit, but it's still it's doable. If you turn off the mask, then we're going to be definitely in the pocket of fast response times. So this, again, another way to get military only for a certain area. Go into standard mode, only have the military enabled, and get into your auto refresh mode, and you're only going to get those types or those classes of aircraft in that location based on the search radius. While we're here, you can turn on you can do a search without a radius, meaning you can just dial in all, and that literally will query and pull in all aircraft that are in the system. Okay, just a note of distinction, ADS-B Exchange is all crowdsourced based on feeders. Okay, you may have seen Monkey's a feeder, I'm a feeder. I sell these breath mints that are these sort of mobile feeding package, and basically these, a feeder is somebody's got a computer with a microcomputer like a Raspberry Pi. This is Raspberry Pi Zero. They have an SDR, a software-defined radio. This is what actually filters and does the first level of distinction of, what it's picking up from the antenna. And then it's got this little whip antenna. Basically, there are like almost 10,000 people across the planet that have some type of feeder set up, and they're feeding into the ADS-B exchange system. Okay. So there are some limitations, right? You don't get feeders out in the middle of the ocean. Okay. So we just don't get data that are out more than maybe 300, 400 miles off coast. There's plenty of people along the coastlines, but that's where the limitation of the range. So we don't get a lot of, cross-continental or, this traffic over these major oceans. Also, there are a couple of countries that outlaw feeding. China, for example, can't feed in China against the law. So whilst there are some borders that will intrude and get some of that data, you don't get a lot of coverage over some of these areas that don't have population or the laws prohibit. But otherwise, amazing, almost complete global coverage with the ADS-B exchange system. Okay. All right. So to finish up here, the last class is this emergency class. And that basically means any aircraft that changes their transponder in flight and declares an emergency, they can be moved into this emergency category. If the emergency category is on and you get an aircraft that is squawking an emergency or declared an emergency, they will show up there'll be a new pop-up list panel on the left, which gives you their, I'm surprised we're not getting any now. Let me get back into all mode and turn off everybody and go on a refresh. Okay. So wow, there's no emergency flights right now. But if there were, you'd get this little pop-up panel on the left with a list of those aircraft. Just like the type list panel or the watch list, you click on one and it'll zoom to that location. Emergency aircraft have a special icon color. It's the background will sort of strobe yellow and the outline is in red. So you can kind of visually see, this is an emergency aircraft. If you don't want to see emergencies, you can just turn them off. Easy breezy. Okay, let me pause there. Any questions? All right, how are we doing on time? It's 3:15. So I budgeted about another 15, 20 minutes. Let me see here. Okay, I'm just popping through my agenda here. All right, let me do a little roundabout with the user interface. We talked, I think, pretty much in depth in detail about all the different pop-up panels that show up on the bottom bottom right-hand corner. We've got our main button stack and all the different auxiliary button stacks that pop out and populate depending on the settings. The lower left has a few things. This SkyGlass logo or the word itself, this is a sort of an Easter egg. Clicking on that will enable or disable this little debugging window in the bottom, this yellow readout. Basically, it's telling you whatever the last thing that SkyGlass did. I did this so I could, decode and debug, but users and the beta testers seem to really like it to know kind of what's happening and see something interactive. So that's going to tell you, and give you some feedback on what just happened, etc. If you turn that off, clicking on the SkyGlass, then you won't see that anymore and get a nice clean interface. You'll notice a few of these little badges. This is a system that we're developing now, or I'm developing now. If you if you're a SkyRider, if you're a paid subscriber, you're going to get a badge. If you're part of the Monkey Nation, you're going to get a badge. If you're a feeder and subscribe to that, there's different badges that you can enable. It's kind of like a social feature, but that's coming, in more detail in a future release. Moving up to the top left, you have the actual time in Universal Time Code. Okay, so that will always maintain a UTC time. I did this so that when people take screenshots, you'll always have a sort of a unified, standardized time. Then onto the right of that, you're going to get the last home location that was dialed in, or the last jumper location. And then based on the home location, it does a lookup of the local weather. Yeah, it's not so appropriate when you're kind of zoomed out and doing, CONUS mode, but basically, this is the local weather for that home location with a little icon based on the, clear sky. We got a sun. And then top right, we've talked about this in detail. We've got all the HUD stuff. Let me turn off pop-up help. We've got the HUD and the counts. You'll notice there's a green icon in the top right. If you click on that, you're going to keep the counts, but it's going to hide that HUD. So if you're going to want a super clean interface, this is what you can do, turning off that HUD. And then you only get the pop-ups for the aircraft at the aircraft, but you're not going to get it in the HUD. Turn on the HUD, you just click on that button again, hover over new aircraft, and you're going to get that data information. Okay, so let me bring that back up. All right, so someone said Long Island. Let's do that. Let's do Long Island. Jump to that location. I'm going to turn off the all and bring the search radius down to something manageable, like 200 miles. All right. And I'm going to bring the mask back and bring the normies back. Oh, all right. So I'm getting a little overloaded here. So let me stop. It's getting a little laggy, I should say. Let me stop. You'll also notice on the bottom of the auxiliary button stack, this little please wait pop up very far. And this goes away if it's not working on something. But if it is working on something, it's going to tell you, please wait. And then depending on what you're doing, if you're loading your watch list or loading the database, there may be another panel that is even more in your face saying it's doing something that's, taking even more time to really please wait for it to finish what it's doing there. All right, so I hit the stop button. Let me burn to clear. And let me see let's dial this down to like 100, 150 and load. There we go. And I'm going to zoom the map in a little bit more. And because I've zoomed the map in, I'm going to want to bring my height adjustment slider down. So I'll click it down a little bit lower. Okay, so we're kind of pushing the limit. It's got, we're pushing 600 aircraft. It's not super bad, but all right, a little over 600. Let me drop this down to something less. Let's wait for that to finish. Let's go to 100 and load again. All right, well, that updated just within that area and it scrubbed the rest. Okay, great. So we put this back in auto refresh mode. I'm going to bring the slider down so we can see everybody on screen. Okay, so this is something pretty neat. I find at least. All right, so I'm going to turn the auto refresh to about a little minute plus, just so it's not going to be competing with us. I'm going to turn on traces. I'm going to turn off this. There we go. Turn on traces, and I'm going to dial this for like 1 hour, and I'm going to turn the all on. And now this is going to tell you, hey, we got a big performance possible hit here. So use it at your discretion. I'm going to go ahead and say show all traces. Okay. And now it's going to go out and load traces for these 400 aircraft that are on screen. And so the traces are not limited by the search radius. Okay, so because we've got this 1 hour, we're going to have traces that extend way outside of this area. But you can already see, depending on what you're doing, this is a lot of load. Like I said, every 5 seconds, there's a trace position that's recorded. Okay, but what I think is cool is this is where you can immediately see where the flight patterns are, right? If you're around an airport, you can immediately see where the holds are. You can see where the vectoring is into the airport. You can see the flow of traffic by looking at a region and looking at all the traces, okay? Even at like 15 minutes, an hour is probably a little bit more to bite off. So let me wait for that to stop. See, it's sort of it's definitely making me wait now because it's got a lot of data. Let's just try and let this finish. So would this kind of view be interesting to any of y'all? Meaning we're more in a geographic location. We want to sort of get a sense of flight traffic and patterning. Is that interest to anybody?
Yeah, I think for the long haul, the long trips cross country, etc. Military doing long hops, that would be excellent.
Yeah, very good point. In that case, in that use case, then I would not do the all, okay, but I would do this by types. So I bring up the type list panel, I'd set that depth out to like 24 hours and then check out K35Rs. Then you can immediately see their refueling shoestrings, their little laps, or are they doing long hauls? C-17s, you're going to get a sense of like how these guys flow, etc. Okay.
Outstanding.
Yeah, cool. So as you can see, let me turn off auto refresh just so we get kind of a static thing here. It's not going to try and compete. It's still loading traces. Yeah. All right. I should have probably picked a half-hour trace. All right. Let me turn off auto refresh. Okay, good. Our please wait went away. So now we know we're okay. But now let me check that out. How cool is that? So like here, you can immediately see here's where the patterns are coming in to, you can see the vectoring right into, it looks like, I don't know where that is on Long Island, but you can see they're all kind of converging here and then down into landing. And even looking at, even on this side, you can see where all the various traces are funneling into these different approach patterns, right? Very cool. And from the other side too, yeah. When there's a weather system too, you can immediately see how like things will be vectored around, and you can pick up where all the holds are and all that kind of fun stuff. All right. Okay, so that talk. Oh, and you'll also notice when we have the all on, you've got a visual indicator. The red, the trace icon is turned red. To turn off traces, to clear all the traces and not burn all the traffic, you can just turn off the traces, and that's going to unload all the trace data. Turning them back on. Okay, so one other distinction here. Let me bring this down to 50, turn on auto refresh. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, in the main button stack, this top button has a couple of circles that are visual indicators of sort of progress. The yellow circle you can see as this starts to count down, that's how much time is left in the auto refresh timer. And then the green one, which renders clockwise, that is the load progression bar. So when things are loading like this, they're pretty fast, but you can see it. We'll do a quick hop if it's doing a lot. And it shows whatever it's loading, whether it's traffic or whether it's the watch list or whether it's the different traces. That's the loading indicator there, how far it is in the load. Okay, and we're at 325. Let me talk a little bit more about Watchlist since we've got a few minutes, unless we have any questions. All right, CJ had to back out. All right, actually, let's do that. Let's go into Columbus, Georgia. Let me pull that from chat. Thank you, Greg. All right, let's drop that here. This is an area that I have not actually checked out before. So fun. All right, let's turn on that.
Yeah, it's a small airport, and you got a couple of colleges around here, so you do get, some traffic in and out. Plus you got Fort Benning, military aircraft, etc.
Yeah, just seeing like a lot of helos down here, a lot of H-60s. Woo, a lot of Blackhawks.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's a sea of Blackhawks. Yeah, let me turn on the type list panel and we'll get a count. All right, cool. And let me turn off normies and turn off mass. So we just get, so you'll see the type list panel automatically reflects what classes are going. So yeah, wow, we got a lot of, I guess a lot of these are EC45s, which let's go isolate mode. I can't actually visually recall what a EC-45 looks like, but okay. Anyway, we all know what a Black Hawk looks like. Spud 4. All right. Making bacon. Okay, cool. All right. So let me back out some of those. We'll bring out military and the mast back. All right. You notice things got a little bit slower with this type list panel going with everybody. So that also, you know, these buttons all take memory. So when you got a lot of aircraft loaded, that can take some time. Anyway, all right. So let me do a thing. Let me add a few more AC to my watch list. Right, and I'm just right clicking around on the field here. Okay, and I'm going to turn off my type list panel. I'm going to burn. I'm going to zoom out. And I'm going to turn my watch list back on. And let me clean up my interface. Okay. So I'll just do a cursory coverage of the watch list, not everything, but the basics. Okay, you'll notice when you add aircraft to the watch list, they are by default put in an unassigned group. Okay, you can create your own groups, and we'll do that in a second. Let me show you. You'll also notice we've got the aircraft icon colors are by their class. If they are not flying, they will show up as gray, since those are some ones that we'd added before that are not showing up. And there's a little tiny triangle showing their elevation or their altitude change. So if it's gray, it means it's level flight. If it's red, it's going down. If it's climbing, it's going to be green. Okay, clicking on the entry will move you to that aircraft's position. Who's this guy? This is reach. Let's find the reach. There we go. Boom. Okay. The entry has 3 different fields. This first field is the aircraft label. Depending on how you added it to the watch list, it will inherit different things. Most times it's going to default to inherit by the hex code first thing. But this label is editable. We'll do that in a second. Next one is the call sign. This next part of the field here is the call sign, and then the type. So this A321 looks like a Dallas, a Delta. There we go. Delta Airlines, probably flight 1043. That's the hex code. If you want to change the label, it's the little pencil on a piece of paper icon. Click there, and we can do a couple things. We can edit the label. So this is Delta, let's say call it just Delta 1. And we can also do some group work here. This is how you add and reassign, one way to reassign groups. So let's say we want to add a new group, click on the plus sign. Oops, let me get the back. Plus sign. And we're going to enter a new group name. Let's call this commercial. I hit enter. Save. Now we have a new group, and that aircraft has been moved into that new group commercial. All right, to close that window, you can either click save or close the window here. All right, so once you have a group defined, you can drag and drop. So you can drag from, grab the aircraft icon itself and drag it into the new group. That's probably a commercial aircraft as well. Okay, another very cool feature, I think, is sort of auto grouping. Okay, so let me move these guys back in to that group. All right, so there's no more, hold on a second, let me reload. Well, that shouldn't take that long. Let me stop, burn. Okay, there we go. Let me take this out of that group. Okay, now that the commercial list or group has been emptied, it will go away. Okay, so if you look in the watch list header, we've got the main header, which is here, which gives you the count, how many active aircraft of the total aircraft are flying. And then on the far right, we've got this button here, which is on by default. These are some auxiliary features of the watch list. This is the one I want to call your attention to, this sort of two windows on top of each other. This, let me turn on the pop-up help. There we go. So this auto groups, meaning it's going to take your watch list and reorganize it into groups based on their types, okay, automatically. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice, boom, now we've got a bunch of different groups, and every aircraft is of that type in that group. So I find this very useful if you're doing military work. Find a bunch of stuff, boom, 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 and then just dump them into the different groups. Then you can do that here. Now that they've been assigned to that group, you can like edit the group name in the same way. Click here, change the name of the group, kilos, trainers. I'm a poor speller at this moment, but anyway, boom. And now you've got the Hilo group, Hilo trainers, etc. And then you've got different things that you can do to that group. You can run flight history by that group. You can turn traces on for just that group, etc., etc. Make sense? All right. Question.
Just a comment. This is very cool. And Fort Benning is now Fort Moore. So I'm going to have to get that committed to memory.
Fort Moore, that doesn't roll off the tongue like Fort Benning does.
No, it does not. No.
All right. So continuing on, unless do you have another question? You're all good? Okay. There are two ways to view the watch list. You can view it in the standard mode, which has the entries with the label, call sign, and type, or by clicking on the teardrop, you move into the sort of location mode, which basically has the same label, but then it gives you a vector on the last known location. Okay, so you can kind of scan your watch list and see, where they are. And it gives you a vector, distance, and then the nearest metropolitan area is what that is. Okay. And then a couple little things. If you just want to see the aircraft that are flying, you can turn that on. And then any aircraft that is not actually active will be hidden from view. You can collapse and expand the different groups. This is a way to collapse and expand all groups. So this is a quick way to, get everything down to just the groups, and then you can tell. And so in the group header, you have the count of how many are in the group, how many are active. If the group is has an active aircraft, it's going to be bright. If it doesn't have any flying aircraft, it'll turn this sort of muted orange. And then the last thing I'll note is, like you can in the type list panel, you can click on the group name with your left button and go into isolate for that group, or you can hide that group. Okay, and then if you have lots of things hidden and grouped, etc., hidden, you can use this reset button in the same way, and it's going to remove all those isolation and hides, and so you're back to normal view. Okay, I've seen a few users that get stuck. They don't realize that one of these is on like this, and they're like, where's all my aircraft? My watch list is empty. Well, it's because you've got something hidden, and you just need to reset it, and then everybody will come back. Okay, you can import and export watch lists to disk, and you can also move your current watch list up to the SkyGlass cloud and then download it to a different device. That's the easiest way to move personally. If you want to share a watch list with a friend, you can just export it. It goes out to machine readable format called JSON. It's just a text file. You can email that to a buddy, and then they can download that, import it, etc. Last couple of quick notes. Beyond just the resize here, there's a couple of little up-down chevrons. The up will resize the window to include all of the aircraft. If you expand the chevrons, then there's some that are sort of dropped off. Click on that again, and it's going to resize it, and it'll resize it based on how many columns and stuff like that if you need to as well. If you do the bottom chevrons, that minimizes the watch list, just gives you the headers. Incidentally, if you double click on this little dragging handle, it does the same thing. Minimize, expand, or maximize to fit everything. And if you want to burn your list from scratch, you can burn by group, and it'll give you a little, a little idiot check there, or you can burn the whole thing and start from scratch. So sometimes when I'm trolling around, I'll burn, I'll go into the database, I'll do some searching, add some watch list stuff up, do some work, and then burn it. And then, but I usually keep sort of my master list up in the cloud, so I can just download that, add it in, and now I've got my 1,000 aircraft that are in my watch list. 1,500. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've gone a little bit over time, and I've covered a little bit more than the usual, but I hope that was useful for everybody. Any closing questions before we close out? Thomas
Nope.
is good.
I missed the first hour, but I will catch that next week. So I
I can do it again right now.
Oh yeah, sure. For some reason my calendar had converted the time to Central Time rather than Eastern, so I was an hour behind. But I just easily catch it next week. But this has been great just for what I've gotten. It's awesome.
I appreciate that, Greg. So I will post this recording probably tomorrow sometime, so you can catch the first hour that way. The other recordings are already up as well. And, I always take a little bit different tack, and we covered slightly different things. So you're welcome to watch any of those. They're all on YouTube, and some of them are in the tutorial section. Awesome. Anything from Mike or Ruth Ann or Thomas? Any other questions? Thomas is good. 5x5. Mike is surrounded by squirrels. Okay. Awesome, great people. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I cover some other plugs. So you might have noticed we've got some branded gear in the Sky or the AVR Labs shop. All that kind of stuff helps. And if you feel like supporting the work and the expansion of SkyGlass in more than just your subscription, you're welcome to join the Patreon. The Patreon, join my Patreon membership, I guess you'd call it. Every little bit helps. I'm a one-man army, and do all this stuff myself, from concept to the website, through doing these classes, through everything else. So if you feel like supporting, I encourage you to do that. And one significant perk of the patrons is that they always have a seat in these live sessions and training sessions. So you'll never miss out on anything like that. Anyway, really appreciate everybody's time and attention. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you later.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Have a great day.
Take care. Thanks so much. All right. Bye for now. SkyGlass out.